Travis, you will be a great camp counselor. On a warm summer afternoon in 1984, my camp counselor said to me 8 words that would change my life. He said to me, Travis, you will be a great camp counselor. Up until that point, I didn't feel like I belonged in lots of places. I was a nerdy kid growing up in a village where they celebrated baseball players and hockey jocks. And my family still talks about how I would walk to the school bus reading one book and walk home from the school bus reading another book. Yet somehow, my camp counselor saw something different in me. I know that I had it lucky because I had a very supportive family. But like many kids, I was bullied on that school bus and I was bullied at school. Yet, Ian McLean, my camp counselor, saw something different in me. He invested 5 seconds in me that changed my life. So on that afternoon, we got out of lunch at camp, went back to our cabin, and he asked to speak to me outside. He said, Travis, can I speak to you outside? We went and stood by the picnic table, asked me to sit down. I thought I was in big trouble. Something had gone on that I couldn't quite figure out, but that I was in big trouble. Yet I sat down, and without preamble, he just said to me, Travis, you will be a great camp counselor. Because of that moment, that set me on a path to this moment and this stage. 5 seconds of his life put me here today. Now, because of what he did, I found my higher purpose in life. I believe that my purpose is very closely tied with the higher purpose of summer camp. And that is to provide a place, a community, where kids can be recognized and acknowledged for their individual talents. And we can help adults find the time to create that moment with those kids. And so I'm here today to ask you to help me make that the higher purpose of every single community. That we find the time to recognize and acknowledge kids for the things that make them special. Now, kids are often lumped into groups. We put them into groups. So they might be one of Mrs. Shields' 3rd grade class. Or they might be a nerd or a jock, or they might be the pretty one in the family. They might be the kid with the funny accent, or the queer kid, or the kid who lives with their grandma because they don't have a mom and dad. But if we take a moment and acknowledge and appreciate them, we give them a place where they belong. Now, I believe that this has happened for most people in this room. So what I'd like you to do is take a second and think about your person. The person who stopped, they're most likely not your parent. The person who stopped and said something to you, encouraged you when you were young. The person who noticed the thing that you were passionate about. Picture that person in your mind. Your person and my person did something that I call the power of one. There's some really interesting research coming out of the Centers of the Developing Child at Harvard University, from Flinders University in Australia, and from a 12,000 child study done in the country of Ireland. Those studies all show that if we invest just a small moment of our time, develop a relationship with just one child, that child's life can be changed. In Ireland, they've taken that research and they've created a program called One Good Adult. Because the research clearly shows if you're a child at risk of drugs, dropping out of school, bad relationships, making poor choices, all you need is one good adult in your life to change that. So this research shows that if a child has someone who invests in them, takes just a moment, as I said for me, it happened at a great moment and it was 5 seconds. Invest in that child, what happens is that they have much higher self-esteem. This is a child who can stand up for his or herself. This is a child who, when she does great at a dance recital, will actually accept the praise that she's given. These kids also have they make better choices in the world. They're much more confident. So this is a kid who will raise their hand and say, I don't understand what's going on. I don't understand that thing that you're trying to teach me. They'll be the person who then can stand in front of a bully who's picking on a friend. They also have much better mental toughness. So these are kids who can try something, learn from it, try again, fail, learn, try, fail until they eventually succeed. And that mental toughness can carry through for the rest of their life. They also know that they belong. And that sense of belonging, as I said, was something incredibly important to me as a child because I didn't have it in my home community. I found it at summer camp. So we can develop these relationships and develop the things that happen with these kids and help them fit in, give them a place. So I was lucky enough when I was 15 years old to have another critical moment, something that happened to me exactly when I needed it. My mother's friends, Marion Crawford, was our hairdresser growing up. And like many of my mother's friends, we had a great relationship. It was cordial, it was polite. Except one afternoon, a Friday afternoon, I know it was a Friday because it was my very first high school dance. I sat down in Marion's chair, she put the drape around me, she pulled out the scissors, she looked at me in the mirror, and she said, "Travis, let's try something really different." Marion saw me as someone different than I saw myself. She changed the way I saw myself. It matters little that Marion and I spent the next 5 years doing every crazy color, cut, whatever we could come up with to do different. It matters most that she saw me as a kid who could be creative and would love to express that. Saw me as someone who would love to express the kind of music they liked by the way they wore their hair. Marion saw me and told me in that moment that she saw me as a very creative kid who could and would love to express themselves. Now, when I was older, I was a volunteer firefighter for 7 years. As part of that, I learned, being part of the firefighter culture, I learned about challenge coins. So I believe that this power of one moment, these power of one moments that we share with kids are incredibly important. Really, it's the essence of my talk. But I think it can also help adults as well. And challenge coins are one of those things that really clued me into how that was possible. So a challenge coin is a token, custom made, that shows you're part of a group. So it's most often a coin that you can carry around with you. They're made for military regiments, for emergency services personnel. Now there are some clubs and other school organizations that are doing challenge coins as well. Challenge coins have an amazing culture around them. It's a true symbol of belonging. And they're custom just to your unit, your group, your club. It shows that you belong. But the power of one that happens with challenge coins is when they are passed off to someone who's not part of your group. They're given on to someone. I love it because they're given in a secret handshake. You tuck your coin into your hand and then shake that person's hand to hand it off to them. So that person is sort of surprised by that moment. What is this? And they take a look at it. That allows someone who may be of higher rank, who may be of greater social stature, in those organizations that are not touchy-feely, and in fact where individuality is often discouraged, it allows that person to say, "I recognize you, I thank you, your contribution is important. What you've done, I believe in." That's the power of one of challenge coins. Now, I received my coin when I was giving a speech at a conference talking about how to get more kids to camp. And at the end of that speech, someone came up and shook my hand, and I was surprised to see the coin that he handed me. He was a retired firefighter who was on the board of a camp. And that camp was created to help kids who had had severe burns. And he came up to thank me for what I had done, helping them get more kids into their camp and helping them to create more programs where they could grow and develop those kids in the programs. So I was encouraged to have that moment where I was given my coin as well. So the power of one is something that, as I say, I think we can all do and I think we should focus on. In order to make it easier for you, I've broken it down and made it into an acronym. So I want you to think about one. Thinking about open, needs, and explore. So you want to be open to these things. You want to be open to the moments when you can have conversations with kids, when you can enjoy a moment with them. So for me at summer camp, that happened in transitions from walking from one activity to the other. It happened in moments where we were waiting in line for the dining hall. But in the rest of the world, I see that happening at camp. I see that happening in places in your lives, like when you're riding in a minivan to a practice, or when you finally have dinner with just one child at the table, Or that kid finishes a practice and they need to sit down, or they close up a book and that happens. There's just a little moment there. So I'd like you to notice those things. So the next part of that is to think about how you can look after their needs. Just acknowledge that they need something. What is it you need? How can I help you, etc. That helps each child in that moment. The next part of that is to engage with them. So that involves starting a conversation. It might be having questions that you can ask them, giving them something that can start a conversation. How can you ask them open questions? Everybody knows when you say, "How was your day at school?" the answer is, "It's fine." You want to ask questions that get more than just "it's fine." Think about how we can engage more. So ask how questions or why questions. Why did you do that thing today? Why did your friend talk to you that way? How did you make that thing that you loved? Ways that we can get into deeper conversations. Now, open needs, engage, or open notice and engage, those are important things to remember. That's why I call it the power of one. So we have that in our mind, but sometimes people ask me, what do I actually do? I get a child's attention, I'm open to this moment, but what do the conversations look like? The conversations look like an exchange between you and them. It is the open questions, it's the noticing the things that are important to them. You know, it's saying, "I saw that you've been reading this book on this topic. What makes you interested in that?" Some of my favorite moments from when I was a child with my dad happened when the two of us would ride in our John Deere tractor, listening to 8-track tapes of Boney M. and Kenny Rogers while tilling the fields. And I would love to go with my dad. We'd spend hours in the fields and just have conversations. Those conversations were centered around my life, how I was enjoying it, what I enjoyed, school, things like that. What made those conversations different than a lot of other conversations with adults is that those were the times that my dad opened up to me, that my dad would share things with me. And that didn't happen very often, and I treasure those moments because of that. So he would talk about where we were going with our farm business, what we needed to do, what livestock we were going to purchase. And as a kid, it was the first time I felt like I was involved in our family business. And I've treasured those moments because of that time. So I hope that in doing this, you see that it's important that we take the time to have conversations, that we notice kids, that we're open to them, and that we have moments with them where we can make them feel great. Because as I said, this impact can last forever. In moments where they really need it, you don't know if 8 words, "Travis, you will be a great camp counselor." 5 seconds of that person's life, my camp counselor Ian, led down a path that has taken me 35 years. So what I'd like to do is give you one last thing to think about. Sometimes it's the conversation things that we stumble over. It's like, how do we get to the next level of conversation? You're so caught up in, I'm having a power of one moment with this person. I've stopped, I've noticed, I've got down to their level, and now what do I do? What I'd like you to think about my camp counselor, Ian. I call this the Ian formula for great conversations with kids and teens. So I'd like you to think about Ian as an acronym: interesting and next. What do you find interesting? What do you love to learn about? What gets you excited? We know kids in our lives who are interested and excited about things because we've seen them sing. They're just so excited. We know kids, and we can pick up on when kids love something because that is the moment where they get their dancy pants on and they talk and run in sentences and they're great big paragraphs that never seem to end because they're so excited about things. Pick up on those. What are you interested in? What's that thing? What's got you so excited? Those conversations you can help continue by simply saying, and keep that conversation going. And what else? And let those conversations go to their normal end. And then the last stage of the Ian formula is the part that I think truly solidifies in that child's heart that you care about them. What's next? What's next for you? What happens when you leave this place? What's the next project you want to do on this topic? What book you're looking forward to reading to next? As an adult, what you're showing to a kid is, I care about this little moment that we're having right now. But by saying, what's next? We say to that child, I care about your future. I care about more than this little exchange right now. I care about what happens to you tomorrow, the next day, the next week, the next summer. So remember, interesting and next. This gentleman's name is Scott Sinclair, and he was the camp director when I finally did become a counselor at Camp Kintail. So Ian McLean was my first counselor, my counselor that gave me this speech, but Scott said something to me at camp as well. In the same way that Ian did, this was a moment where I really needed something from an adult that I looked up to. He didn't know that, but he was willing to give it anyway, and it's had an impact on me. So during a performance evaluation, Scott said to me, Travis, people like us really need to do things that surprise others, that blow away other people's expectations. So maybe we don't actually go on to secondary school. Maybe we travel instead. Maybe we work flipping burgers. Maybe we work in a factory. But we need to do stuff. People like us need to do projects like this because it helps us be more empathetic leaders. It helps us have more empathy for the people that we work for. So great advice from Scott. I've obviously never forgotten it. But the magic of that conversation to me was when he said, Travis, people like us. This man that I looked up to, this man that I respected, this man who had my dream job, said, people like us. He was signaling to me I was like him. And because Scott Sinclair said people like us, I have worked around the world teaching leadership to adults and kids around the world. Because he said that, I am calm and collected in emergencies, because he changed the way I saw myself. Because he said that, I was able to get up and lead silly songs in front of a couple of hundred people with no problem whatsoever. Because Scott said that, because he said people like us, I've been able to go around the world training people to build communities where we notice and appreciate each child. Because Ian said that, because Marion said that, and because Scott said that, I also was able to find somebody, in fact more than one, and say to them, you know, you will be a great camp counselor. And that's the power of one. Thank you.